I've rejected social media almost in its entirety, which is completely atypical for a founder. Honestly, I feel like you should have strong conviction and strong opinions in the area in which you work, even if it's controversial. And if it's controversial, that's probably a good thing as well.
I'm joined today by Tony from Inngest. We talk about marketing, positioning, iterating, and finding the right level of abstraction.
It's almost like sprints in engineering. Take 2 weeks, work on a couple different traction channels, write a marketing spec, test what you're going to do the thing. Did it move the needle? Cool. Take another 2 weeks and do another 2 week sprint. It's also hard, developers are a hard audience.
It's like,
that's the fun part.
Yeah.
Like the building of it, the journey of building is really, really, really fun. And then you get it out, and then the journey of iterating is a different kind of fun. And that different kind of fun can be both really good and really bad, because like you're talking about with the autonomy, the absolute, honestly, lack of obvious direction to a degree at times. It can be particularly challenging. Like when you do GTM or whatnot, there's so many different directions you can go in, and knowing which one to do can be particularly challenging at times. And so I feel like you just have to be comfortable with throwing stuff on the wall and seeing what sticks. And that is really, really hard as a solo founder. So I understand where you're at. I don't know how people do the whole solo founding thing. I like full respect for them.
Yeah, 100%. I even struggle with the context switching. It's just like me, it's like if I do out like marketing-y stuff, it just makes me so like the radiation in my brain is like so high. So just like my focus levels just like are not there. And then like go to coding, I'm just like kept checking social media like every 5 minutes or something. And like it's like hard to go like I don't know.
Yeah. And there's a really good book called Stolen Focus.
Oh yeah?
Which is literally about that.
Really?
Yeah. The intro to the book is about this guy who has a kid. His kid's a teenager, and he notices that the kid is just always on the phone and he can't focus. And the kid was like super into, I think it was Elvis when he was like a little kid, not a teenager. And he always wanted to go to the Elvis place in America. Dreamland, I think is called, maybe?
Something
like that.
It's Memphis, right?
It's in Memphis. Yeah.
Two Brits.
Yeah.
Outed ourselves.
Yeah. Somewhere in this place.
Yeah.
And he takes the kid, and he's like, on one condition, you can't use your phone. And then he sees the kid like a drug addict in the corner, like taking out his phone, checking social media, and he just doesn't live in the world in the moment. And the book is about recapturing focus so that you can sit for extended periods of time doing things like work when the gratification is delayed. And that's like, seems to be getting harder and harder, just overall in the world, which is tough.
Yeah. Because how do you do it? Because you must be on your phone the entire day because everything runs through it, no?
It does. As you probably know, I've rejected social media almost in its entirety, which is completely atypical for a founder. I don't mess with Twitter. I'm not on IG. I'm not on LinkedIn. I am, but like the profile was vacant. Just because there's so much to do in the company to company build, but then my co-founders and other people in the team do that more than me, which is okay. And that helps me focus. But even then, with the context switching in the company, there's so much stuff that crops up, and there's so much stuff that demands attention. It can be really, really tough. And I bought the book so I could get more strategies on how to fix that.
Okay.
Like last week, actually, I was thinking about It's all very relevant and topical. Yeah.
It's for me, it's like I started like locking my phone in my locker. I had like a locker, and it was like actually quite. It did like my productivity was like noticeably like a gazillion times better.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, it's helpful. It's probably a really good idea, actually. The willpower and the determination and the realization, honestly, that you have to come to realize that is really good.
How much time you're wasting.
Yeah. I've done the same thing.
Yeah. It's hard because like scaling dev tools, I have to there are legitimate reasons to be posting on Twitter.
Sure.
Like to be on Twitter, I go there for legitimate reasons.
Totally.
And then I just end up like doom scrolling.
Yeah, totally. I understand that. And theoretically for GTM to build an audience, I and other founders should be doing the same thing. but then you sit there and you like start scrolling, and then you look at the text box, and you're like, I've got all these ideas, but I don't know how to phrase it in so many characters on Twitter in the first place. And it takes me 20 minutes to write a tweet when it should be like, if you have a chat like this, it just...
Yeah. What stuff do you do instead of going on social media? Because that's maybe like something that people are like in their head, like, okay, so what else can I do? Like, it's like, because it feels like everything that we talk about is like social media. Like,
yeah, social media is really taking over the GTM and sort of like awareness thing, right? Which is fair. And I think that's like honestly pretty good, because to a degree you want distribution is hard, and to a degree you want to own distribution yourself. And so technically it's right that you should build an audience and try to make that work. And people have talked about this for a long time. It's very understood. Personally, I don't do that. My co-founder Dan does, and that's great. We also rely on other people that have done audience building to help talk about us, which isn't... It is good in that it's short-term gains, but it's not long-term owning your own distribution. But it's still a thing that gets your name out there and bypasses that you need to build your own audience over the long term. And in fact, to a degree, you might say it could be better, arguably, because when you build your own audience, the chances are the audience that you're speaking to understands you and the product that you built. And if you go to people that have built their own audiences and share with them, the overlap will be maybe some, but there'll be a lot of net new. And so we just go out and find people that have got their own audiences that are talking about things and see if they're interested in partnering. And that works and is pretty good in terms of the social media game. I think like in terms of just general awareness for dev tools, there's so much to talk about.
yeah.
It's just like, dude, have you read this book Traction by the DuckDuckGo founders?
No.
Dude, fantastic book.
Really?
Yeah, and he talks about how you can create a traction plan, which is tactical and strategic, and it's almost like sprints in engineering. Take 2 weeks, work on a couple different traction channels, write a test, a spec, a product spec, write a marketing spec, test what you're going to do the thing, come back, see if it worked. Did it work? Did it move the needle? Cool. Take another 2 weeks and do another 2-week sprint. And he does like, I think it's like 19 traction channels. Some of them are YouTube, sponsorship, emails, emails with your own audience, cold emails, which is just, I've never done it.
Cold emails.
Cold emails. Yeah, I've never done it. I get a ton.
Yeah.
AI just filters them out for me, which is wonderful. Yeah. But you list all these traction channels.
I've written a lot. Sorry.
Have you?
Sorry. Yeah. Apologies for my sins.
Hey,
yes.
No, that's interesting.
But you were saying so.
Oh, well, yeah. You got all these strategies. You think about all these different strategies and channels, and then you think about the activities that you can do within these channels that can be accomplished in the short term to see if that channel works for you. And then you iterate on it on a bi-weekly basis, which is pretty good. And that's like, honestly, everything from partnerships to marketplaces to conferences to sponsorships of different things. And like, Colin from Zod is fantastic, and Clerk did the whole V4 sponsored thing, which is kind of cool. Stuff like that, which is nice. We sponsored a bunch of like GitHub folks for that sort of stuff. But I guess like, yeah, we can break down some of the stuff that we've done to try and grow what we've talked about. But social media is like just everywhere.
Yeah,
everywhere.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you're actually thinking of, like, your time is going into the strategy of these things, but it's not like, I'm not the one writing the tweets and stuff, which I think could be, honestly, I think it could be a better way to do it, because it depends on the person, right? But like, I do see how much time I waste, so I could believe that.
Yeah, it totally depends on the person. And I think like some people have got a really good voice and a really good tone. I think like some people are just naturally pretty good at it as well. Some people are just such good shit posters that it makes me laugh so much. Dude, love it so much.
Yeah.
And I don't write the tweets, I don't do the thing. But I think over time, the marketing team will try and convince me to. and or push you into that and be like, here's something I wrote for you. Give me the login.
Yeah, you're going to be a thought leader at some point, for sure.
What a phrase. Yeah.
Scaling DevTools is sponsored by WorkOS. If things start going well, some of your customers are going to start asking for enterprise features. Things like audit trails, SSO, skim provisioning, role-based access control. These things are hard to build, and you could get stuck spending all your time doing that instead of actually making a great dev tool. That's why WorkOS exists. They help you with all of those enterprise features, and they're trusted by OpenAI, Vercel, and Perplexity. And if you use them for user management, you get your first million monthly active users for free. I honestly don't know any dev tools that have 1 million monthly active users, apart from GitHub maybe. So that'll get you pretty far. Here's what Kyle from Depot has to say about WorkOS.
We use WorkOS to effectively add all of the SSO and skim to Depot. It's single-handedly like one of the best developer experiences I've ever seen for what is like a super painful problem if you were to go and try to roll that yourself. So for us, we can effectively offer SSO and skim, and it's like 2 clicks of a button, and we don't ever have to think about it. It's like one of the best features that we can add to Depot. It's super affordable, which effectively allows us to like break the SSO tax joke and essentially say like you can have SSO and skim as like an add-on onto your monthly plan. Like it's no problem. So it really allows smaller startups to essentially offer like that enterprise feature without a huge engineering investment behind it. Like it's literally, we can just use a tool behind the scenes and our life is exponentially easier.
Probably not. Yeah, we haven't spoken about thought leadership actually, probably for good reason. I don't know. I mean, I feel like if it's genuine, surely it is a good thing, right? Like, in theory, it's a good thing.
For sure, in theory, it's a good thing. And I think like taking a step back internally, when you're talking to your own company, you need to sort of share the vision of where you're going and why you're doing the thing and what you're working on and why it's important and the problem that it solves. And that's like telling a story, which is kind of in a way salesy, thought leadership-y type stuff to your own team. And then when you're talking to investors, you do the same thing. And the really fun conversations that you have with investors or partnerships, it's like when you talk about the problem that you're solving, what's changing in the world, why it matters, why now. I think that's like quite inspiring for people overall, because like, especially when you hear somebody's thought process that's similar, maybe slightly different, they bring up interesting points and it helps you sort of become either more aware or think differently about what might be happening in the world. I do think it's good in limited doses. Yeah, it's pretty good. Then you can get sort of carried away in your own world.
Yeah.
Which is and like honestly, the execution of the thing that you're doing is so very important that I think like in my mind at least, everything ties back to the execution of the product that you're building and the problem that you're solving and how you can make that work really well. So
is it kind of just more, it should be like a byproduct of like what you're already doing? It's just, you just talk about what you're doing while you're doing.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's like you should totally have opinions and what's the word? Opine.
Yeah.
Because
you probably do that anyway,
yeah,
right? Even if you're not on social media.
For sure,
telling
for
your
sure.
friends.
Yeah, exactly. And you should totally do that. And you, honestly, I feel like you should have strong conviction and strong opinions in the area in which you work, for sure. And if you don't, I would have some internal questions about working in that space in general.
Yeah.
And if you do have strong opinions on that particular area, you should have some sort of medium and long-term plan and understanding of what's happening and what's changing, and have the ability to actually talk about it, even if it's controversial. And if it's controversial, that's probably a good thing as well. Then like, I'm not going to sit here and talk about, I don't know, finance.
Yeah.
I'm not going to talk about anything to do with Bitcoin or any of that stuff anymore. Like, just, I don't. So,
but you will have opinions on, like, you were saying, like, primitives. I think you've spoken about, like, that we should use the existing primitives and stuff.
Yeah. Dribble execution, queuing, flow control, how you actually build workflows. Totally have fairly strong opinions about software architecture in general, for for product flows, for AI, which is everywhere nowadays.
Yeah. Okay, I want to get onto that. We're gonna get to AI for sure. But I actually realize I'm a very bad interviewer here. You were saying some very interesting stuff that I got caught away talking about thought leadership. But before that, you were talking about like the sprints in the 2 weeks, and I think people would be very interested in hearing like if you've tried that, if there's any things that you've learned in doing that, maybe like any specific examples.
Yeah. So we've tried that, and typically at any given time, a few traction channels that will work for your company, and those traction channels change over time. So what works now might not work in 6 months. They might not work if your audience changes or if you want to move up market. They might not work over time, not because your product changes or the audience changes, but because you exist. You sort of not exist. You sort of exhaust the entire audience that's available in that particular traction channel. But specifically for us, we sat down and we took a look at a bunch of traction channels that might be relevant. There's the whole content marketing stuff. There's the whole content plays, education plays, developer education, YouTube sponsorships, conferences, that sort of stuff. And we tried a bunch of them and iterated through what might work and what didn't work, and the pros and cons, the results. It takes time and effort to sit down, just like it does with a product plan. And in our head, we sort of then mapped the unknown of marketing, because none of us were, when we started the company, marketers, to product and engineering, which we all knew really, really well.
Yeah.
Because we've been doing that for a long, long time. And we were like, well, when you're building a product, you work iteratively in the sprint stuff that we mentioned. You come up with a plan, you implement it, and you see, did this particular thing work? Was this worth building? Do people use the product feature and so on? And you should do the same with marketing. What are we going to do? How are we going to test it? How are we going to track it? Did the thing work? Is it worth continuing to invest in? Pretty basic stuff, but it's helpful for us as product and engineering, I guess engineering on my behalf, to have a mental mapping to sort of like understand where you're moving in some sort of familiar world. We did that, and then we realized that content marketing was pretty good for us early on. You need to write about what you're doing in order to gain trust. For us in particular, we run your product. Not the code, not the execution, but the orchestration of said thing, the state, the queuing, that sort of stuff. And you need to trust us to do that. Because it's not like a derivative of your application like Datadog is. It runs your application, and so the barrier for entry is quite high. So we need to just talk about what we're doing, how it's different, why it's important and interesting anyway, to sort of gain trust. You need some sort of credibility. If you go to a website and they've got no technical articles, but they are a technical infrastructure tool, probably would ask questions.
Yeah.
So there's like some obvious stuff that you need to do. We did that. That was pretty good for us. And then we realized that there's a bunch of stuff that works. There's a bunch of stuff that drives traffic. We ended up partnering with a few YouTube folks. I think that's been pretty good. You want to give people examples of what you can build when you build developer tools. Because if you can give people examples of what you can build and show them how it's used, it's much more inspiring and interesting than talking about an API.
I think so. I've been playing around with one just this morning, and I think sometimes you just have like, there's often like, they have their own primitives or their own sort of ways of doing things. And like, you might be trying to build it in a really weird way, use the API in a really weird way. And I think if you just see how someone does something, it's often like unknown unknowns that you wouldn't even look for. That like, if you see an example, it's like, it's just extra information. I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. It gives you like, also we were talking about the mental model for marketing coming from an engineering point of view. And you can like map the 2-week product sprints to marketing and understand sort of, as an analogy, when I do this in engineering, I should do this in marketing. And when you look at the code and an example of an API or a product, like when you look at ingest step functions and the examples of how it works to build a workflow, it's so much better than reading the documentation of like, oh, this is how step.run works and it's a code level transaction. Because then you're like, cool.
That it
thanks.
like means nothing to you until you're like, I want to make this thing work.
Yeah.
Oh, and I know I need to use step level.
Exactly. Unless you've lived the problem and you've understood distributed systems, or you've built something with Kafka, or you've done the whole microservices thing and the queuing based approach, if you're a net new user looking at new technology and you don't understand the problem that it solves innately, meaning you've lived the problem for years, you always need some sort of explanation to understand and show you why. Always. And that's the same with the whole live syncing stuff that's sort of taken over the past couple month or two.
Yeah.
It's been slowly growing. I don't think anyone's really truly lived the problem themselves, dealing with CRDTs and live syncs of local data versus their background data in Postgres. You understand from a face level that, this must be pretty difficult. But then the website that you go on and all these different products will show you concretely his demo, here's how it works, here's the problems that it solves. And then it gives you some appreciation for the tech that they've built in order to solve it, which is
Spotify
cool.
example.
Yeah. That was the one. We're talking about the same thing.
Yeah.
That was great.
It was the guy from Prisma, right?
Yeah. That was cool. Yeah. And so, we found that to take it back to the 2-week sprints and the marketing and the traction book from the DuckDuckGo founders, we found that YouTube was pretty good and code examples were pretty good to go along with the YouTube stuff, because that's how people learn, which blows my mind as a kid growing up reading books in the 90s on how to program. That's how people learn, is good examples, which gives you inspiration and understanding of the tools overall. There's a bunch more channels that we need to test, that we should test. And as the company grows and inertia carries you on, some of the traction stuff that you do early on doesn't necessarily carry through, like what they're talking about. And your audience might change. You might realize that you don't want to target solo founders and you want to target Series A, B, and C companies. Or maybe you were targeting larger folks and you want to move more mid-market to get more awareness. The traction channels are massively different, even if it's the same product, the same problem, the same communication. And so we're also walking that path of how do the traction channels change depending on the audience and depending on the target customer, the ICP, which is super interesting because again, given the area in which we work, orchestration, durable execution, step functions, workflows, some people know that they need that right out of the gate. And they know that building using Inngest is going to save them months of work and that they can build much faster. Some people learn that after a painful lesson of trying to work with Celery or RabbitMQ, and I should use this. And so a lot of people have lived the pain when they get to Series A or Series B or Series C. And so we've got a bunch of companies that are growing from the ground up with us, like the Data.ai folks who come from HubSpot, manage massive Kafka instances and are like, nope, screw that. We're not going to deal with all of that. We're going to build an Inngest because it'll be faster. But it's actually really good to also speak to the mid-size and the larger companies, like Avalon Bay, the real estate company that owns all the apartments, like a bunch of apartments in America, now using us to do a bunch of the leasing stuff, because they also live the pain of dealing with bare metal and Azure and AWS, and they want to simplify everything.
Yeah,
the audience massively changes how you communicate in marketing and in sales, and we're still going through that now, which is it's really interesting.
Yeah. So how would you communicate to a developer at this lease, this company that leases apartments versus, I don't know, I think Resend, usually, right?
They're great. Fantastic people at both places, but they work at completely different paces.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm surprised at how fast Avalon moved, given they're a public company.
Really?
Yeah, super surprised. Genuinely took me by surprise. So a company like that that's public cares greatly about risk, which is something that we were talking about with trust before. They care greatly about risk. They care greatly about, will this do the thing? Is it trusted? What's the security? What's the scalability, and so on. And then a company that's younger cares about risk, but takes way more risks.
Yeah, because they have to.
Yeah, they have to, and they want to move faster. And your edge as a small company, not the only, but one of your edges as a small company, even if you're doing the same thing as an incumbent, is how fast you can move, how fast you can build things, which is a factor of also how much risk can you take. Like Google has fantastic products and a bunch of really great AI stuff, but I feel like they probably can't take as many risks as a super young AI company that's building generative models that can be a little more YOLO.
Yeah. I mean, they've got a multi-trillion dollar company
yeah.
that they have to maintain the reputation of and like not get sued for billions. Whereas like this small company's worth like 15 million. So like, why
exactly
not
that.
just, like,
Exactly that.
what's the risk?
Yeah. So there was that thing about Google with the whole pizza stuff, and there was another one with Microsoft a couple of years ago when they released some early AI stuff before GPT was a big deal, and a lot of people just like laughed at the results.
Oh yeah, I remember.
Yeah. Which is like totally fair, but then you can be a younger company, do a bunch of things wrong, make a few blunders, and no one really cares. Because people don't appreciate risk as much, which is great. And you can talk to them more about developer speed, DX, ease of getting started, which the larger companies still care about. Fundamentally, if you're talking to an engineer at a YC company, or if you're talking to an engineer at a public company, they still care about their life, how good the tools are, the experience.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think any engineer joins JP Morgan and is like, I love the CI/CD process here. I love going through 10 hoops just to get something in production.
Yeah.
And so the DX is still good. And it's actually, in our experience, easier to walk the path of talking to smaller companies up the scale than it is talking to larger companies and trying to then do PLG afterwards. Because the PLG stuff maps to enterprise, and enterprise is essentially a superset of the PLG stuff. You've got all your base needs of DX, speed, ease of use, decent APIs, power, flexibility, and so on. And that's relevant to both. And then when you take a look at the enterprise stuff, you've got all of that and the trust and the VPC peering and the are you globally distributed and the SLAs and all the standard security stuff that you have to go through. And so I think it really depends on your company positioning. Company positioning is such a big deal. You can have like 5 products all doing the same thing, and the positioning will totally change how their trajectory, how they sell. Yeah, it's crazy.
Are there any things that you've sort of learned on the positioning side of it?
So we build a pretty technical product, and we make it easy for pretty much every developer to build really complex systems, because you don't need to worry about the underlying infrastructure. Step they'll run, code level transactions, it'll do the thing, it'll retry. It's pretty easy to undersell that. It's pretty easy to assume that you've done the wrong thing or that people don't understand it when there's an educational piece that needs to happen. Because no matter what, you've got all of this complexity underneath, and that complexity doesn't just go away when things fail, which they inevitably will. And you've got one service over here talking to another service over here via networking. It will never be 100% perfect. When things fail, you have an educational piece of why did this fail? How did it work? Why did it work? And I think it's pretty easy for you to sort of assume that you've done something wrong, or assume that you've built the wrong product, or assume that something might be innately wrong, when all it takes is small UX tweaks to show users, oh, this went wrong because you fucked up DNS yourself. You didn't add HTTP to HTTPS redirects, for example.
Yeah.
As a dumb example off the top of my head. And I think that's super interesting. So how you position and the target audience, is it relevant to the problems that you're solving is a really, really, really big deal. I know that the latest episode you had with 11 Labs is super cool.
He's
great.
a cool guy.
Yeah, he's a cool guy. Yeah, that was great.
Yes.
I'd love to meet him. I feel like he was talking about something where he was talking about bedtime stories with the Stephen Hawking voice.
Yeah.
And he was like that's cool. The positioning for that particular thing where you get like indie developers or indie users writing, voicing over a blog post is super different to a healthcare company that's accepting phone calls and trying to figure out, does this person have valid insurance?
Yeah.
And the messaging is massively different despite the product being the same fundamentally. And I feel like, it's interesting. We sort of adjusted our messaging over time to sort of honestly be a bit more technical so that we could self-select for the people that understood the problem, despite it being a little bit more limited in audience. Like we're not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense because I guess like if you're just getting started as a developer, like you probably don't like, it's like, okay, you get your React, you deploy it to Vercel, whatever. Like you don't immediately need to be like, okay, I should go learn how to use Inngest. It's like, it's more like it's almost like you kind of have to like
Live the pain.
feel the pain.
Yeah. You do.
Like
you do.
manage your own queues and
Yeah.
retries and everything,
Yeah.
and then suddenly be like,
Yeah.
try and understand what's going wrong. Try and debug something where you have like completely opaque
It's crazy.
processes that you haven't set up and it's in production, and it's like, oh my god, how
Yeah.
do I fix this thing from happening?
Yeah. We were talking to a user today who's got like a bunch of VMs. Each VM is a separate worker connected to a separate queue. When a user signs up, they have one queue that runs something and another queue that runs something on all these VMs. And the guy was like, our deploy process is insane because when you deploy, it needs to roll out to each of these services that all listen on specific things.
Yeah.
And it's like a nightmare to follow the thread about what's happening. It's like when we moved over to Inngest, you have one endpoint, you can split it up over multiple. You have one endpoint that just does the thing. You write some code, you roll it out. There's no infrastructure, there's no queues, there's no event streams, there's no new Kafka topics that you need to create. It just does the thing, and you get like branch environments and whatnot out of the box. And he was like, our engineers are so much better. But I sort of feel like you're right. Like you throw up a backend, you throw up an API endpoint, you add something to it, and you're like, you know what? I could probably just use this queue, smash out a queue, smash out a worker.
Yeah.
It does the job.
Yeah.
And then as time grows, you're like, oh, I've created a monstrosity.
And I don't know how to get off of this.
Frankenstein.
I can't get off this ride.
Yeah.
That's my life philosophy.
That's funny.
Sometimes the choices make it's good. Developer tools are great.
Yeah, they're great. I genuinely respect people building developer tools, but it's also hard, you know. Developers are a hard audience.
Yeah.
We're fickle people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's
it's
true.
good ways, I think. We've got like a really high barrier to entry. There was a good Hacker News post. Dude, this is how I spend all of my time.
Hacker News.
There was a good Hacker News post
That's
earlier
how you
today.
wish. Yeah. No, that's good.
That was a good Hacker News post today, or series of comments about taste and about how you get into something because you have good taste. And I think like engineering is part of that. Good engineers have taste about the code that they're writing and about the architecture they want to develop. And you end up going down this path of add a little queue here, add an event stream over here, add some PubSub and Kafka here. And you read about it and you're like, I'm excited to build this architecture. You do the thing and then you take a step back and you're like, oh fuck. I did something and I'm not proud of it.
Yeah.
You know?
100%.
It's me in the kitchen when I first learned how to cook. Cause like stuff is everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's I think the first time you start building something that's got like it's a little bit more complex, it goes very wrong in many ways. Or even if it works, it's just like it's a nightmare. You have no idea what's going on. When it breaks, you just don't know why. I think that's like a huge one.
Yeah, exactly. That's fundamentally what we wanted to solve, you know, just make it easy for people to build complex things. Because I did exactly the same thing as you, a healthcare company, and healthcare is healthcare. There is so many workflows, like so many patient flows that you go through, and there are so many steps to a patient flow. There are also conditional. Like if a doctor submits a treatment form and something hasn't happened within 3 days, we must follow up. And if a patient submits something to us and the doctor doesn't follow up within like 7 days, for example, we are liable for care and the company is at risk and we need to do something. And those processes are just code, but it's code that's like, do this, have some sort of queue that sleeps for 7 days, that reads some database state, that checks if this particular thing happened, and then it will throw something else into a queue to do some other thing. And like, similar to the company I was talking to today, following the needle through that is horrible. Coding and building those flows, engineering that was a monstrosity. And it was super hard to debug. And if you had the APIs that we ended up building for Inngest, everything that took weeks would have taken like an hour. You could have vibe coded it. Dude, I wish that were
Yeah.
take me back.
Well, that's the best thing to build, isn't it? Something
Yeah.
that just saves you. Yeah, and when things don't happen, it's hard to on a big scale, like it's hard to debug that as well, like to figure it out that it didn't happen and stuff.
Yeah,
like,
totally.
Until you get like a really angry email or like something like that.
Yeah, totally. And like things in human processes always slip through the cracks. Like I use Superhuman now, and I just realized that Superhuman has been filtering a subset of my emails out to a separate tab. Really? And I'm like, oh shit, I've got like fucking hundreds, thousands of emails that I need to go through. And none of them are particularly important, except for maybe one or two that I go through and I find. And I'm like, like things slip through the cracks in human processes all the time. And yeah, finding out what went wrong is really, really tough. And that's also one of the reasons that we were like, events are the way forward. Because when you use us, you're not really building a true, fully event-driven system, like event-sourced, which is just jumping off the deep end without a parachute, hoping that you're going to land in snow. But you are sending events over to Inngest, and you do have all of those stored forever, and they are a really good audit log of everything that happened. And so in our patient flows back in my previous healthcare company, you would say, hey, patient did this, doctor submitted this form, a doctor then submitted this prescription. This particular thing was produced and then sent to the customer, sent to the patient. And you could follow the needle of all the facts that happen within this particular flow. Obviously, tracing helps a great deal, but having the events to understand exactly what happened with all the data at any particular point was great. And then in your workflows, you can say, step.run this particular thing. I want this workflow to wait for this other event, wait for this thing to happen in the real world with this matching expression. And as soon as this happens, continue on with the workflow. Or if this doesn't happen within 7 days and it times out, check if the resulting event was undefined, and then handle the fact that something didn't happen in the real world in code. And the API is like 2 lines of code. But then the interesting part is from an architecture point of view, your controllers, your API endpoints, they don't need to know about anything. They're just like, this fact happened. This doctor submitted this. Send the event over. Any workflow that's listening and paused will automatically resume, and you've got like really good architecture bundled in. That helped with the debugging, but like it was always a pain. I wish that I had the system that we ended up building to build that company.
Yeah.
Like so badly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Send it back. Send it back in time.
Take me back in time. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think like now with AI, it's like it does. So I was playing around with one of the products of the people that I interviewed recently, Tavis, which is like a video AI, conversational AI, conversational video AI. So it's like quite interesting how it works, because like you can give prompts and you can give like tool calls and stuff like that, and it's like it will start, like there's just the paradigm of like how you develop stuff is just different, because it's like you're kind of just giving it like things to do, but you don't really know what it's going to end up doing, and like you're handing off a lot more control.
Yeah.
And so I feel like, tools like Inngest, I'm sure like you've got lots of interesting stuff to say around like how that's changing, and like how programming is different when you're kind of handing the wheel over a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. There's like different levels to talk about. Firstly, I'll start by talking about the problem that we solve, and then how that's difficult for AI, and then how we make it better for AI. And then I'll talk about just like the overall process of using AI and tools in general and orchestrating that. Fundamentally, when you use Inngest, you get event streams, queues, workflows, state, all backed by a simple API. You define a function, the event that should execute that function whenever it's received. And then you can do step.run and so on. And that's basically it. It's a few lines of code, completely abstracts the underlying infrastructure. And that's pretty cool, because then if you're asking AI, hey, when a user signs up, I want to do these 3 things. The AI can be like, blah, blah, ingest.create function, user/sign up. And it could be like step.run. And and then you hit deploy to wherever your existing code goes. If you vibe code in probably one of the hosts that's like not AWS,
Okay.
probably one of the other
Yeah.
folks. And then you're sort of like, you're done. Basically, you don't need to learn the infrastructure.
Yeah.
You don't need to learn Kafka. You don't need to worry about queues. You don't need to set anything up on Railway. You don't need to set up a Redis server to manage the queue, for example.
Yeah.
You just like vibe code away the workflow and you call it a day. You move on with life and everyone's happy. The world is a great place.
Yeah.
If you don't do that, you have to learn the infrastructure and then you have to ask AI to maybe sort out Terraform, sort out Redis, and then connect to Redis and then give me a queuing client and so on. And that's like a little bit of a pain. So I think like the takeaway, the TLDR, is that higher level abstractions over infrastructure will probably always win versus the lower level infrastructure now for moving products forward, because people build products faster, higher requirements, higher barrier to entry, people are vibe coding. Like, there's no tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
But in order to do that, you need like higher level abstractions to make it work, which is like, do React is sick, and React is a really good abstraction over UI, state, HTML, and so on. And we're the same, but for the backing infrastructure. And yeah, I feel like that's like one interesting part. The second is like, yeah, the whole orchestration of AI agents in general and how to do that is craziness, man. It's craziness. It's super fun.
Yeah.
We can't vibe code our product because like we're knee deep in building queues. I wish we could just be like, hey, give me this completely fair multi-tenant queue, please, and it would just without some. We can't do that, but you could probably do it with some. Some of the UI and whatnot. And it's crazy what you can build now.
Yeah.
It's like absolutely bananas. In a really, really good way.
Yeah.
I was chatting with one of our users on Friday. We were actually both at some MCP hackathon, and I met him, chatted for an hour and a half. He'd already built his entire thing for the hackathon in the car on the way over using Claude Code on his phone.
No way.
Yeah, on his phone in half an hour in the Uber on the way
You
over.
Claude Code on your phone?
He's got some weird setup,
'cause
but
it's
like a
like a ton.
VM on like, you know.
Okay.
He showed me it as well. So like,
Child
I was like,
developer.
is he just, yeah. I was like, is he just chatting crap? But then he showed me it on his phone and I was like, dude, this is crazy. And then within half an hour, he was done. He was just
What was
chilling
it
and
he
chatting to
built?
people.
It was like,
This is, it's potentially politically incorrect.
okay, it's not an AI girlfriend, is it?
It's not an AI girlfriend. It's it's even worse. I think it's actually even worse. Tism.co.
Oh, well, something to do with autism.
Something to do with autism. Yeah, exactly. You give it social media profiles and it gives you a score.
Oh,
yeah. I was like, dude, are you really gonna enter this into the competition? And he won one of the things.
He won?
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Crazy.
That is wild.
Just
built with Inngest. Just put it on your landing page.
we're an infrastructure company. We don't control what our users build. Genuinely, this is crazy stuff, man.
That's very well. I mean, yeah, that's pretty insane. I need to try Claude Code. Someone told me it's really good, actually.
It's pretty good. Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
It's pretty good. We know the Cursor folks. They're really nice people. Claude Code is good. There's the whole, just that area is exploding. But for us, I think. This is interesting as well. We've had a bunch of users reach out to us because they see us on GPT or Claude, and they're like, "We asked ChatGPT or Claude how to build this, and they recommended you. Can we chat?"
There's like queues, probably. I feel like would be like a people were like,
queues.
how do I build a queue or something?
Yeah,
And then
queues,
it's like,
dribble execution, how to do that serverless, all that sort of stuff, and they reach out to us, and that's super interesting. Like really, really, really interesting. And I feel like it's super interesting as well because you never know when the model cutoff date is. And the model cutoff date is basically like, one of the questions I had is like, does it just enshrine all of the infrastructure that's been created up until that point? And if you build something new now, AI just doesn't know about it. So it becomes harder. Like, it's crazy.
it's like kind of like a
Like it solidifies,
you weren't there now,
entrenches
like
all the
you're
stuff.
done.
Yeah,
yeah
exactly, which is wild. So I feel like there's this like arms race to build as much as possible because everything gets enshrined and solidified, which is what I don't know how much that's going to happen and to the extent in which that's going to happen. But we've been around since 2022 publicly, and that means that we're in all the models.
Yeah.
And then when people ask, Drupal execution platform or workflow platform or serverless queues, they're like, use us.
Yeah.
And that's super interesting and something that I didn't think was going to be like a GPT SEO game.
Yeah.
But it turns out there is.
Yeah.
Which is wild.
Yeah. It's like, it is interesting.
Yeah.
Although maybe, never know, maybe they're going to start discounting, having a massive discount on things that were more than a year ago or something. So you have, I don't know,
freshness
is valued or something.
Yeah, that
so,
would make sense.
I just wanted to go back on the level of abstraction and what level you're working at. Because for if you're building a consumer product or something, you might think about this differently to a dev tool.
Yeah.
So how you guys would feel about levels of abstraction, because it's something that I personally probably made very probably wrong decisions on how on my own tool, and how the level of abstractions that I was building at as a solo dev. And so, but there's pros and cons, right? So if you're running your own data centers, you're going to have very cheap, you look at CloudFlare, right? They have been able, they wouldn't be able to do what they can do unless they were controlling everything. And so they can do things for cheaper than everyone else and still make a lot of money.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, that's slower to do. And so how do you think about
Yeah. So I'll talk about us and actually Cloudflare. Let's talk about Cloudflare first because everyone knows Cloudflare and not many people know Inngest. So it'll be more interesting for everyone.
You all know Inngest now, right? Everyone listening.
Two ends. Cloudflare is super interesting, right? Because they had this wedge. And I think fundamentally what you're asking about is also a wedge. And the wedge for Cloudflare is the security product that everyone needed that allowed them to build out this network, this networking infrastructure that then they could use to leverage to build other things on top of. And that wedge was so effective in that security is such a good game. Everyone needs it. Government mandated. Have to do it. It's not too hard to sell. I'm not trying to undervalue Cloudflare here, but the wedge is good.
Yeah.
And then they could build out this global networking capacity so that they could absorb DDoS attacks, which were relatively big deal back in the 2010s.
Yeah.
And then they could use that entire thing to say, well, now we're going to do workers and all this other stuff that they threw on. And I feel every 6 months, there's a new set of products that get added to the cloud that just never ending things, which is great. And the level of abstraction was cool because they realized that building at this level fundamentally on the infrastructure side lets them build other things on top, which then cumulatively add to the power of the platform. For us, it's interesting in that orchestration of your product, the workflows, the step functions, the queues, and so on, typically have been relatively static infrastructure like Kafka that doesn't really know anything about what your product does. And that level of abstraction is maybe too low in that Kafka versus Red Panda versus WarpStream, who they're really great people, now work for Confluent. It's all fundamentally the same. Your basic arguments are how does it scale, what's the cost, and so on. How do I manage this infrastructure? Inngest is slightly different in that it sits a level above, but not too far above. You send it events, but those events are properly typed. We understand the event names because they run functions, and we understand how your functions run because you write the functions as regular code, but you wrap them with step.runs, great code level, step level transactions. And because we're aware of a little bit more about what's going on in your application, it's pretty interesting in that the code runs with the state no matter what hosting provider you're in. You can have it running on Vercel and then switch to AWS. You can write it in TypeScript, and then because of the way our SDK works with the IDs and steps, you can switch it to Go, deploy it onto EKS, and it will pick up where it left off, even if it's running for a month. So it kind of actually makes where you run the code fungible Like it doesn't actually matter whether you run on Vercel or
Yeah.
AWS, because the code does the thing no matter where it is, even if you change it. And then it also commoditizes a little bit of the event stream stuff and the queuing stuff that's existed for like 20 years and hasn't really changed. And because it actually runs the code, it's interesting in that the observability data and the event data that it generates is not necessarily a derivative of the application. It's actually part of the orchestration and the workflows. And so that lets us do a lot more with this particular data in the future, and it lets you get a lot more out of the product. Like if you send events to us, why can't you just get like real-time ETL and forward them to Snowflake? Why can't you query the events in Inngest overall? Because we already have that data, and we could give you an audit trail, an API over that data in general. And so like I had this long-term plan building the company of like, well, here's where we start, here's what it gives you, here's the level of abstraction, here's where we go in 10 years time, and so on. And that, yeah, I think like for us, the wedge as well, to comment on the wedge, was like, oh, serverless orchestration, which is hard and is just never really existed. But then walking the path of the level of abstraction to see what you can do and stack on to make the platform in a way compound. I think like back in 2010, all the startup folks were talking about like network effects of social media. And it turns out that like in our view, there's network effects of like products and platforms. And you build this one OG product that might unlock 5 other things that you can then sell or build into your platform. The symbiosis. Oh man, what a word. Sorry about this. I'm just coming up with all the the way that they work together increases the sort of, it makes all of the platform better. It makes it all more powerful. So for example, CloudFlare, you get DDoS protection, but then you also get workers and you get the whole edge stuff. And you're like, well, if I'm doing all that stuff, why don't I just use R2 instead of S3 with egress? And it makes the product a little bit better.
Yeah.
We sort of have the same thing beginning with orchestration to other stuff that we will end up doing. But firstly, we just want to make orchestration really good. And that takes a lot of time and effort and engineering. It's a really hard product to build. So we got a little bit of work to do to make orchestration as good as we want it. And it's really good, but we could make it better. And then we'll start doing other stuff.
Yeah. There's still more to
so much more.
hammer away at.
More to have. There's always endless. Like I think that's also hard. I don't know how you found it when you were doing your thing, but I think like there's this sort of naivety that you have when you're building a product of like, I just need to do this, this, and this. And then you do that. And then you realize that everything you build is like this, like a fractal sort of experience where then you build 10 other things or you have 10 other things to fix. And then suddenly you got this like explosion of roadmap and product backlog and
ways it can go wrong.
Ways it can go wrong and all this, all the stuff. So yeah, it's there's always more to do.
There's always more. Okay, we're at 10 minutes, so I just want to do a last question. So the last question is, if you have any advice for DevTools founders, like if you had one thing that you really want to say.
One thing is, and I think probably on your podcast, people have talked about this, 100% think about distribution. Who are you talking to? How are you talking to them? Where do they hang out? What kinds of people are they? What is the messaging? Because even if you build a really, 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 really fantastic product, it doesn't actually matter. The way that you talk about it is equally or to a degree more important. And each one of them impacts your growth rate. You could have fantastic customer segmentation and pricing segmentation and messaging, but maybe pretty poor targeting on the audience. Or maybe you have all of that done and you're talking to the right groups. Maybe you've got the right YouTube partners and you're doing the right content engineering, but your homepage, the positioning, the way that you talk about your product, the story that you tell is just wrong. And that single thing might be the thing that's slowing you down. And so distribution overall encompasses so much. And it's, the annoying part is, unlike engineering, it's so ambiguous and hard to pin down. That it can be really, really, really tough to understand what the right call is to make. So thinking about that from like first principles is particularly important. And then another one that we just always talk about internally is like, well, yeah, first principles and also just friction. Making something that solves users' problems is ultimately all we're really doing, you know? Like you can play around with tech for tech's sake, and that's cool. And I think as engineers, we innately love doing that. And I think that's part of the allure to building dev tools. Like, damn, we get to build really good technology, and that's going to be really fun. But ultimately, it serves a purpose, and everything that you do is to solve that problem. And sometimes as engineers, we can 100% get sidetracked by the fact that we are doing cool engineering things. That's a trap. Watch out for that trap. Build things that solve problems, which is the same advice that you've heard for years. So I wish I could be more original, but I can't.
Yeah, that's amazing. Okay, and actually, I do want to ask you one more final question, because I think you're the first East Londoner that we've had on the,
yes, sir.
on the show. And you live in the Bay for the last 10 years, right?
Yeah.
So, or more.
Yeah.
So one recommendation if someone goes to East London.
Oh, mate. Oh, it's got to be the bagels.
Yeah.
It has to be the bagels in Brick Lane.
There's two, right?
There's two.
Which
But you go
ones?
to the one with the line, white sign, blue font. It's just called Bagel Bakery, I believe.
The beef
bagels, with
really
mustard
good.
and some pickles.
So good.
So good. If you're a West Ham fan, which you shouldn't be, just don't do it. Full of sadness, tears, and unhappiness.
Do you know a lot of my family support Millwall, by the way?
Oh, really?
Anyway, sorry, that's massive. Anyway,
I mean, it's so close. I understand it. There's a pub called the Little Driver down in Bow, which is a good place where a lot of people have gone for some time. But I wouldn't recommend it if you're a tourist visiting.
You will meet some real East London geezers. And is there any English stuff in SF?
Do you know what, mate? I've been so removed from our culture for so long.
Okay. No. The answer is no. Okay. All right. Okay. Well, yeah. Thank you so much, Tony.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
It was really
man.
fun.
It's
Thanks.
great to chat with you. It's always great. Thank you so much for having me on. Yeah, you're a great dude.
And likewise. By the way, I should say, first time I ever met you, you went and I was in your office, and you were like, you could do an interview with David, another British DevTools founder, and you went and skateboarded and got your camera and brought your amazing camera, and just were it was the first time I'd ever met you. It's incredibly nice, generous guy. So,
dude, for sure. That was a good episode as well. You know, I feel like the production quality has slowly cropped up. You know.
Yeah. Well, that helped though. But yeah, thanks everyone for listening. Go check out Inngest. Go follow. Don't follow Tony on social media, but go check out Inngest.